Justin, let's begin with you. Talk about Ernest Moniz's record.
Right. Well, I mean, to some extent, this is kind of the classic revolving door situation. As President Obama mentioned when he nominated him to be Energy Secretary earlier this month, Moniz was an undersecretary in the department in President Clinton's second term. After he went back to MIT, but he also took a number of positions on boards of large energy companies or advisory councils. As you mentioned, that includes BP. It included a uranium enrichment company called USEC. And I think there's sort of two reasons why this is important. One is some of these companies do business with the Energy Department and seek contracts and loan guarantees from the department. The other is people in the environmental community think that this may inform how Ernest Moniz sets research priorities, so people are concerned that he's going to call for research on fossil fuels to the detriment of research on renewables, for example.
BP, talk about his relationship with BP.
Well, there's kind of two prongs on that front. One is, personally, Moniz did a 6-year stint paid, although BP won't tell me how much, on BP's Science Advisory Council. It's not really clear what he did. BP doesn't have to reveal much about it in their public SEC filings. At the same time, BP is one of the main funders of the MIT Energy Initiative. I think they've given or pledged a total of $50 million over the past few years. So he's clearly close to that company.
And how typical is this for a university professor?
Well, I think in the sciences, and in particular in sort of the energy secretary, it's increasingly common. I mean, Stephen Chu, the outgoing energy secretary, who's also an academic, actually also had close ties to BP. BP had given a bunch of money to Stephen Chu's lab at the University of California, Berkeley, and Chu picked a BP executive to be one of his undersecretaries. And Chu was later involved in the government's response to the Gulf oil spill. So, I mean, I think this is certainly common if you're going to be picking an academic who's involved in energy and particularly fossil fuel research.
I wanted to turn to comments of the executive director of the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC. Earlier this month, Peter Lindner posted on the NRDC blog a to-do list for the new energy secretary. In it, he wrote, quote, "As a scientist, Moniz is obviously a firm believer in the power of clean energy technology. MIT's energy initiative projects under his tenure included windows that generate electricity, batteries built by viruses, and a biofuel made from yeast. But he also believes that technology must be complemented by policy in order to affect real change. As he said at the Aspen Ideas Festival in 2006, in order to address global warming, we must have the will to take more than baby steps." NRDC is supporting Moniz's nomination.
Right. I mean, and it's completely true. Moniz has spoken in favor of renewable energy. I mean, I think the best way to sort of interpret his nomination is that he fits in with what Obama has called his all-of-the-above energy policy, which is to embrace things like fracking, continued use of oil, nuclear energy, but also develop wind and solar. And I think that's where Ernest Moniz is on energy policy.
Let's turn to our guest in Los Angeles, Kevin Connor, and what you found in your report. Talk about the report that you did that looks at, well, the title of the report is Industry Partner or Industry Puppet, how MIT's influential study of fracking was authored, funded, and released by oil and gas industry insiders.
Sure. Moniz's nomination prompted us at the Public Accountability Initiative to take a closer look at an influential study that MIT did on the future of natural gas, as it was called, in 2011. It was issued by the Energy Initiative, which Moniz was the director of, and it gave a very pro-gas, put a very pro-gas spin on fracking and shale gas extraction. Said that natural gas was a bridge, or will be a bridge to a low-carbon future. Said that the environmental impacts related to fracking are challenging but manageable, and also endorsed natural gas gas exports, which is a very industry-friendly position to take. It immediately, prompted some criticism from people who pointed to the fact that the report was actually industry-funded, much like the initiative itself. But it was extremely influential. It was designed to influence policymakers. Moniz testified before Congress on the report. It had immediate impact as well. And it came at a critical time for the industry, which was facing significant questions about the safety of fracking, the relative environmental impacts of fracking. And we took a closer look at the study and found that beyond just the industry funding of the study, there were significant conflicts of interest that went undisclosed in the report itself and in presentations of the report. And those involved Moniz and several other key authors of the study. So as it turns out, it was not only just funded by industry, it was also authored by industry representatives.
Kevin Connor, I wanted to turn to a 2011 press conference at the MIT Energy Initiative where Ernest Moniz introduced the study now under contention, The Future of Natural Gas. In his opening remarks, Professor Moniz emphasized the report's independent of its sponsors and advisors.
I do want to emphasize a disclaimer, if you like, that while their advice was absolutely critical, they are not responsible for the recommendations and the findings. We have not asked for an endorsement. We asked for their advice. We received it, but the results then are our responsibility.
Later in the presentation, co-chair Anthony Meggs introduces the MIT report's findings, saying environmental impacts associated with fracking are, quote, challenging but manageable. However, Meggs failed to disclose he had joined the gas company Talisman Energy prior to the release of the study.
Messages are very simple. First of all, there's a lot of gas in the world at very modest cost. As you will see, gas is still, globally speaking, a very young industry with a bright future ahead of it. Secondly, and perhaps obviously at this stage, although not so obvious when we started 3 years ago, shale gas is transformative for the economy of the United States, North America, for the gas industry in particular, and potentially on a global scale. Thirdly, the environmental impacts of shale development, widely discussed and hotly debated, are, and we use these words carefully, challenging but manageable.
Kevin Connor, your response.
Well, it's absolutely outrageous for Energy Initiative, for Moniz and MIT to pretend this is independent of industry. Well, first of all, given the fact that the sponsors of the report are all, industry organizations and companies like Chesapeake Energy, Moniz was attempting to say that it was somehow insulated from the influence of these gas companies, when in fact, authors of the study, such as Moniz and Meggs, had industry positions at the time. Meggs's quote there is particularly insidious. The fact that he is saying that fracking is safe for the environment when he had actually joined Talisman Energy, a gas company, one of the most active frackers in the Marcellus Shale, a month before the study was released. So he is speaking to a room full of journalists there, presenting a report designed to influence policy and not disclosing that he is on the industry payroll. That is perhaps the last person in that room who should be presenting that finding or having anything to do with authoring that kind of report. And yet MIT and Moniz thought it was appropriate to put that spokesperson forward. So it just goes to the fact that MIT was really sort of presenting an industry brochure here with a lot of pro-gas industry advocacy talking points and not revealing that there were significant conflicts of interest here.
Justin Elliott, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to note is Ernest Moniz is getting a confirmation hearing next month, and as part of that, he has to release a personal financial disclosure, and also at some point later, he'll an ethics agreement will become public. So we should actually learn more about his current and recent involvement in these companies, and possibly also stock holdings and that sort of thing. So it should be interesting. I think the story isn't over yet.